James, that was a truly magnificent introduction. Could you do it again? And after that wonderful introduction, I really don't know what I'm going to say. In fact, I never do know what I'm going to say, as people have begun to notice, unfortunately. But it is a great honour to be here today. And wait a minute. Try and move over to the mic. There should be a mic on me, but it may be not working. So here we go. All right, can you hear? Oh, wait a minute. All right, can you all hear me now? Bad luck. Well, what I was saying before I was interrupted was that James Taylor had just given a most wonderful introduction. I asked him, could he do it again? But he thinks he could. Now, I'm very grateful to be here in Las Vegas, the city of American culture, 2014. Now, we Brits, of course, are great admirers of American culture. Baseball, Batman, blackjack, and bubblegum. And are there any Canadians in the house? Ah, there's always a few. They get in everywhere, you know. Well, can you imagine how unlucky Canada is? Canada could have had the best of all possible worlds. British government, American management, and French culture. Unfortunately, she got the worst of all possible worlds: French government, British management, and American culture. How to alienate an audience in 20 seconds. But it is glorious to be here with Heartland in Las Vegas, and I just want to get you all to join me in congratulating Joe and Diane Bast and all their wonderful team. God bless you all. That's the easiest and most richly deserved standing ovation I ever got. Congratulations to all of you. You are wonderful people. Your courage and your persistence, living always on the edge of wondering where the next penny is going to come from, and yet you lay on these lavish and splendid and profoundly influential conferences worldwide. And you have no idea how many people around the world are grateful to you for laying on such marvelous conferences with such great regularity. Well done. Now, I did notice this morning that there were quite a number of latecomers looking a little poorer than they had the night before, and I guess they might have perhaps wandered into the casino. Now, as you know, at Heartland conferences, we do give you the science. And so I'm going to give you the one equation that you really need to know if you're going to go into the casino. And here it is. It's one of the easiest equations to understand. If you take the number of staking units of capital that you have available, and you divide it by the house vigorish, that's the house percentage, it comes from the Yiddish word vigorish, then that will give you the expected number of spins of the wheel or turns of the card before you run out of cash. And this is known as the mean expected duration until ruin. So if, for instance, you have 100 units of capital, supposing it's a $10 minimum on the tables here, and you have $1,000, that's 100 staking units, and you're playing American roulette with odds against you of 5.3%, then you do that division sum, and after 1,900 spins of the wheel, you will have run out of cash. Is there anybody here who's run out of cash yet? Well, it's only a matter of time. So, one of the things we face, one of the battles we face in the, sorry, that is me in Arab headdress, I do apologize. It was presented to me by an Arab businessman on my visit to Qatar a couple of years ago, and Arab hospitality dictates that one should show appreciation by wearing a gift of this kind. So I had to wear it to the conference the next day, which gave the man from the Times a wonderful moment. He was due to interview me. He walked straight past, not seeing who I was. So I said, "Assalamu alaikum," and he jumped out of his skin. But the power of illusion is what we face. They have spun up an amazing series of illusions to make it look as though there might be a problem with our emitting CO2. Now, what I want to do is to show you how powerful illusions are, and for this I'm going to need a young lady from the audience of exceptional beauty. So who would like to volunteer? I see one in front of me here. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane Bast. Now, Diane, we're going to give her a proper round of applause. Come along.
I'm going to regret this.
No, you won't. You won't. Stand there. Stand there in front of the microphone. That's right, so that they can hear you, because that's the model. And as you know, the first thing we have to do is calibrate the model. All right. So think of a number between 1 and 7. Don't tell me. Multiply it by 3. Add 1. Multiply the total by 3.
Yikes. Okay.
Add the number you first thought of. And your answer is?
I'm confused. I need to start with a smaller number.
Now, this is an example of why models don't work. Right. However, what we do when they don't work is we try again and we do another model run. Think of a number under 4. Multiply it by 3. Add 1. Multiply by 3 again. Add the number you first thought of, and your answer is?
24.
She's no good at math either. We'll rerun that one with the same number. We're now going for the third model run, but don't worry, because when you combine all these model runs together and take an average, you've got an ensemble. And then you have the real answer. So we're going to do it again. Think of a number. Multiply it by 3. Add 1. Multiply by 3 again. Add the number you first thought of. And your answer is?
13.
And her number was 1, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations. The model is now calibrated. So now we are supremely confident that having tried 3 times out of 3, and the third time it actually worked, we have a machine that is efficient for its purpose. But we have seen that there is, as computers often do have, a certain amount of difficulty with doing elementary arithmetic. Kevin Trenberth, please note. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a pocket calculator to do it with, all right, because this is going to be easier for you. So here is a pocket calculator. Let me just fire it up for you. And there we are, and we'll just zero it. And can you see, what does it read there?
It reads 0.
It reads 0. Very good. Now, what we're going to do is the only keys you are going to touch are the number keys and the X there, which is for multiplication. Right? Yes. We're going to do a multiplication sum. All right. Now, would you like to put in the last 4 digits of your phone number? Very good. Now, I want anyone to give me a 3-digit number. 278. So hit the times key and put 278. Very good. Would anyone like to give me a 2-digit number? 24. 24 times 24. That's right. And then we want a 1-digit number. 9. Thank you very much. Times 9. And then one more 2-digit number from one of the lads down here. Come along. 10. Okay, times 10. Times 10. All right. Now, what I want you to do is to look at the audience, and they're looking at you with admiration and gratitude.
Yes.
And I want you to read out, I want you to press the equal sign and read out the number that you have there.
Looks like 314,159,265.
And there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That is the correct answer. Well done.
Thank you very
Now,
much.
Diane, you're not going anywhere yet because I have some further work for you. First of all, I have to explain how that illusion was done. It was, of course, magic, and in particular, I already knew the last 4 digits of her phone number. But of course, if you look at that number, which was on the readout, remember she was facing you, she couldn't see what was on the screen when she read that out, you will notice that if you divide it by 100 million, you get the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. Because when you do this kind of a trick, you will find that the most intrusive of the mathematical constants, the fundamental constants of mathematics, will shine through, as it does here, every time. So now, from now on, every night here at the Mandalay Bay Casino, the Viscount Monckton will be playing magic. All right, so we move along then to what I'm really here to talk about, which is the end of an era. Forgive the pun, but we are now ahead of the game. We are definitely at the end of an era. In fact, I want my money back. Because when we were made to pay for this failed theory, we have had to pay billions for it, and I could do with my billions back. I don't know about you. And so I thought I'd better go into the pet theory shop and have a word with that nice Mr. Pachori that owns the shop, and say, I want my money back. So I go in and I say, look, Mr. Pachori, I want my money back on this pet theory. It's a dead theory. He said, no, it's not a dead theory. It is absolutely fine. It's a beautiful theory. Look at its plumage. I said, no, it is deceased. He said, no, it is just pausing. I said, what do you mean it's just pausing? It's fallen off its perch. He said, no, it's just pausing. These theories, they like to pause, you know. Oh, my goodness, they like to pause. And I said, no, it is a dead theory. And he said, no, it is not. I said, yes, it is. I said, it has shuffled off this mortal coil. It has kicked the bucket and handed in its dinner pail. It is up there with the choirs supernal. It is a dead theory. It is an X-theory. So, that's the end of that. Now, I want to do an experiment with the audience. And I need your help with this one. Because, as you know, one of the biggest arguments against us is there's a consensus. As though this was some kind of an argument. Can we all practice that? There's a consensus. Now, Aristotle, 2,350 years ago, some of you are old enough to remember, actually said that argument from consensus was a species of feeble-mindedness known as a logical fallacy, one of the commonest logical fallacies in human discourse. But the fact is that there may be a consensus, and we're going to check that now by doing an experiment, and Diane is going to help with this. And I'm going to ask you half a dozen questions. Here is the first question, and Diane is going to read it out to you.
Does climate change?
Right, hands up all those who do not think that climate changes. Diane is going to tell me how many people don't think climate changes.
No hands.
So we have, ladies and gentlemen, 100% consensus that climate changes. Cook et al. 2013, eat your hearts out. Now then, read this one out too, number 2.
Has the atmospheric concentration of CO2 increased since the late 1950s?
Right, hands up all those who do not think that the concentration of CO2 has gone up since the 1950s. Diane, how many hands?
No hands whatsoever.
Another 100% consensus. Go on to question 3.
Is man likely to have contributed to the measured increase in atmospheric CO2 concentration since the late 1950s?
Hands up all those who disagree with that proposition.
No hands.
No hands. Number 4.
Other things being equal, is it likely that adding CO2 to the atmosphere will cause some global warming?
Anybody disagree with that? No. No hands again.
No hands.
Number 5.
Is it likely that there has been some global warming since the late 1950s?
Anybody disagree that there's been warming since the late 50s?
No
Once
hands.
again, no hands. Very good.
Is
And
it
this is the last
likely?
one.
Good. Is it likely that man's emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases have contributed to the measured global warming since 1950?
Anyone disagree with that? Once again, no hands. Now, you may say, why have I bothered to ask these actually fairly crass questions, which are an insult to your intelligence? That is because we are all too frequently accused of not accepting any of those points. And I wanted it to be made absolutely plain to those who are watching this from afar that we are not climate change deniers. We do not deny that climate changes. We do not deny that CO2 is increasing or that we are somehow responsible for some of that. We don't deny, therefore, that we could be causing some global warming. So get that clear. Climate skeptics are not skeptical of the things we're accused of being skeptical of. But look at the results of this survey of 11,944 papers in the scientific literature published between 1991 and 2011, a period of 21 years. They said that 97% agreed that humans are causing global warming. In fact, they say we are the cause. We would say, the only difference is we would say we are a cause. But we have 100% consensus. Now, what I want to do is to have a little closer look at this particular survey. I've nearly finished with you, so don't worry, you're doing very well. Isn't you doing well, ladies and gentlemen? She had no prior notice of this, and I think you've stood up very well under this onslaught. Now, on the slide that you see there now, you will see 3 separate definitions of consensus. The first one, that humans can be causing some warming, is the definition of consensus that all of us agree with. We have 100% consensus, they only have 97%. Now, the next definition of consensus is that most of the recent global warming since roughly 1950 was caused by us. Now, on that, I suspect there would be much less unanimity in this room because we do not know what fraction of the warming since 1950 was caused by us. And yet, when Cook et al. Reported their results, they said that they had found a 97% consensus to the effect that most of the warming since 1950 was caused by us. That was their definition of consensus. It is the same as the IPCC's definition of consensus. It's the official definition of the climate consensus, that we are responsible for most of the warming since 1950. Now, I'm not going to ask you your views on that, because as good scientists, you don't have one. It might or might not be true. But let us, therefore, look at how they managed to present what is actually a 0.3% consensus in the reviewed literature on that question as a 97.1% consensus. The first thing is they eliminated 2/3 of all the papers they were looking at on the grounds that they hadn't expressed an opinion. Now, that is not normally how these surveys are done, but that's what they did. They knocked those out. Then they congregated together 3 levels of endorsement, only one of which was the majoritarian endorsement that most of the warming since 1950 was caused by us. They lumped that with the explicit or implicit endorsement of the consensus that we all agree with, that maybe we have contributed some warming and we don't know how much. They put all those together, and by conflating these 2 completely different definitions of consensus, they claimed there was this consensus of 97.1% that most of the warming since 1950 was caused by us. They said so in their paper, and they said so in a subsequent paper commenting on their paper. And it was only when my good friends David Lee Gates, Willie Soon, and Matt Briggs and I got together, did the math, and published a paper in Science and Education showing what the true figure was, that the truth began to emerge. And we're going to ask you a question about that later. And this is where you come back into the picture, because Oh, I don't know what that slide is doing there. Far be it from me to suggest, but no, what we're going to do now is we're doing another audience experiment, because what I want to do is to see how many of you, have, and you all read avidly on this subject, how many of you have read about various facts about the climate in the mainstream news media. And I'm going to ask 10 questions this time, and all you have to do is put up your hand if you have seen a reference to any of these in the mainstream news media. And we're not going to ask you to read them out each time. All you've got to do is stop me as I flick through them, and if you see a hand going up, don't stop me otherwise. All right. So here is the fact that since 1990, the global warming, as measured by just about all the methods of measurement, has risen at exactly half the central rate then predicted with what was said to be substantial confidence by the models. How many of you have seen that published anywhere? How many of you have seen it published anywhere that it might be for as long as 17 years and 10 months that there has been no global warming at all? Once again, the one or two people only have seen that. Let's take number 3. How many of you have seen it in any mainstream news medium that sea level might actually have fallen in the 5 years shown on the graph there? No, I didn't get many hands on that one. Here is another one, that both the extent and the trend in global sea ice has shown very little change in the 35 years since the satellites were looking. How many of you have seen that reported anywhere? Just one hand, I think, perhaps 2. Here is another one, that hurricane activity over the last 5 years or so has been at its lowest in the entire satellite record. No, not many hands, though, a small number over there. I think mostly to do with Mr. Gray, who knows everything. Then, he's a lovely man, incidentally. Then, how many of you have seen it reported, a recent paper, that the fraction of the Earth under drought, the land area under drought, has been declining for 30 years? None at all on that one. And that windmills can kill big game birds. More of you have seen that one. We're beginning to get through on some of these points. And then that methane has been increasing its concentration, but at below the predictions of all the 4 previous IPCC reports. How many of you have seen that? No need for a cow fart tax. Only 1 or 2 have seen that reported. Number 9, how many of you have seen it reported that there is substantial evidence in the literature, and here is one of my favorite examples, Grinstead et al., sea level rise reconstructed over the past 1,000 years, put against the original IPCC representation of whether there was a medieval warm period and a little ice age. There's a relatively good match, which means at least there might be a causative connection. That certainly doesn't match with the hokey stick graph, which I won't want to say anything more about. So has any of you seen the possibility that the hokey stick graph might be wrong, and that the IPCC's original estimation that there was a medieval warm period, a little ice age, and temperatures today are not particularly much to write home about? How many of you have seen that in the mainstream news media? Hardly a hand, perhaps no hands.
No hands.
No hands. And finally, how many of you have seen it reported that the supposed 97.1% consensus that most of the warming since 1950 was caused by us is actually a 99.7% consensus that they have said no such thing? Not a single hand. Now, I did this for a reason. Diane, we must give you our warmest thanks and let you go back to your loving husband. You've been a real star. Thank you very much. I did this for a reason. I am angry. Democracy cannot work if the news media will not report any fact, however obviously true, however obviously interesting, if that fact happens to go against the Climate Communist Party line. The operation of democracy, as your founding fathers knew well, depends on the people being given the widest and the fairest choice of information. That was why you had, for instance, the Madison letters, the papers that were published in the journals of the day, so that people could follow the proceedings of the Constitutional Convention and get in touch with their representatives. They were given the facts on both sides of every debate. And that is how it should be now. But I'm going to call out the BBC, the Los Angeles Times, and all too many other news media now who refuse to publish any fact or any opinion contrary to their particular perceived opinion that climate change is dooming the planet. It is unacceptable to those of us in this room. It is unacceptable to the vast majority of the American public and of the public in the West as a whole that we should not be given information of the sort that I have just run through with Diane Bast's help here. You must tell the truth even when the truth does not point in favor of your point of view. And here is how easy it is for these newspapers to check whether or not the UN's climate panel is getting things right. Here is an irreducibly simple climate model. I shall be testing you on this later. And what we're going to do is to use this very simple model to look at the IPCC's latest report, and here are the conclusions. We notice, first of all, from the IPCC's report that they have cut down, top right of this graph buried in chapter 9 of the report, they've cut down the feedback sum by 25%. What that means is that the sensitivity, the climate sensitivity to a doubling of CO2 on their new value for feedbacks should only be a central estimate of 2.2 Celsius and not the 3.3 they've been working with. So they didn't tell you that. What they did was they said for the first time, we're not going to give you a central estimate of climate sensitivity. Why? Because they knew perfectly well that on the reduced feedback sum, they had to reduce the climate sensitivity to 2.2, and they weren't willing to tell you that. Now, I want to tell you who it was that persuaded them through a very influential paper that he wrote, that they had overestimated the cloud beat feedback and therefore the feedback sum. It was your speaker this morning. It was Roy Spencer. Give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And you will see various other conclusions from the model. There is, in fact, as far as we can tell, no committed but unrealized warming in the pipeline. They say there's 0.6 Celsius waiting to come out of the ocean and say, boo. Well, there isn't, as far as we can tell. And we think that climate sensitivity is our best estimate, rather than using the IPCC's methods, which would lead to 2.2 Celsius per doubling, probably 1 Celsius per doubling, which is a figure which increasingly appears throughout the literature on climate sensitivity. And also that because there is a limit to the amount of fossil fuels on Earth that we can realistically get out, we might only be able to warm the Earth by 2.2 Celsius over the next 300 or 400 years until those stocks are exhausted. The moment you see figures like this, you begin to realize we don't really have a climate problem at all. But I do have a technical question I'm going to ask very, very quickly. And that is, here is the temperature record reconstructed by Juzel et al. 2007. Willie Soon kindly sent me this paper. And it shows that the variation from the 810,000-year mean in global temperatures is only 1% up or down in absolute terms, 3 Celsius. That's all. That's not the pattern of a strongly feedback-driven system, is it? And so if you look at the feedback equation here, you have loop gain going horizontally, you have climate sensitivity to a doubling of CO2 going vertically. You see that huge singularity at a loop gain of 1 in the output of temperature change. And the fact is that singularity cannot exist in the real climate, because once you go above 1, then feedbacks that had previously been driving up the temperature are suddenly going to drive it down. There is no mechanism physically in the climate by which they could do so. They are using, in my submission, any guidance you may like to give me after this, I'll be grateful for, they are using the wrong equation. If they are, then we can establish in theory, as well as by measurement, that the maximum climate sensitivity you're likely to get for a doubling of CO2 is indeed just 1 Celsius. So if anyone can clarify that point, we'd be grateful. Now, Matt Briggs, who is one of our co-authors on a paper we've just submitted along with Willie Soon and again David Lee Gates to the Chinese Science Bulletin about this new discovery, said you need to draw a graph showing the various predictions of how fast global warming would happen, show the observations, and then show where the model comes. So we did this, and this was the graph that came out. And it looks as though our model is better than all of theirs, simple though it be. So give it a round of applause. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Because you can be sure that when that paper is published, they'll say, well, you started with this graph and you worked back until you bent all the numbers so that it fitted. We did it the other way around. We did the model first, then we ran it, then we did this graph. Now, what I want to do is finish off by talking about where all this is going at the geopolitical level. Now, at Copenhagen in 2009, they tried to put through a world government treaty. The word government was actually used in the draft of that treaty. You see it here. And they were also going to try to abolish free markets. They were going to try to impose a huge economic cost of 2% of GDP on the world. They now admit in their latest IPCC report that the total cost of not doing anything and letting the global warming happen as predicted would be 2% of GDP. That's all. The costs of making global warming go away are far higher than that, and yet they haven't stopped this process. Here are the democratic provisions in full that were listed in that treaty draft for the control of this new world government by the electorate. There weren't any. And when I first revealed the existence of this graph, thanks to Willie Soon, who found it and sent it to me, I made a speech in Minnesota about it. Within 2 weeks, it had got this number of hits, 2.7 million hits. What happened next was very strange. I got a phone call from Texas A&M University, from somebody there who said, you have been subjected to a very interesting attack. And I said, what? They said they've created a dozen bogus internet pages containing the words Monckton video, which everybody is using to find this video. And those are being ranked above your video. And I said, well, are they good pages of fascinating information? No, he said, they're pages of gibberish, exclamation marks, dashes, just nonsense. So I said, well, why are the search engines ranking them higher than this video? He said, you don't know much about this, do you? I said, no, I don't. He said, they pay. And I said, okay, so how much did they pay the search engines to push me down the rankings behind these rubbish pages? He said, I don't know, but I do know quite a bit about this. He said the absolute minimum that it will have cost them is $250,000. Now, this is startling because it shows the sheer staggering amount of money that is being spent by the forces of darkness to try to shut us up. Well, it isn't working. Then there's Cancun. Now, at Cancun, even after they'd been thrown into reverse by China at the Copenhagen conference, refusing to have anything to do with it, so the treaty failed, they decided to adopt the approach they have followed ever since. They began to set up, willy-nilly, the structure of a world government. Here are some of the organizations they set up. And here are some more, and some more, and some more, and some more, and indeed some more, and some more, and some more. Look at that bottom one there, it's quite entertaining. And some more, and some more. Nearly 1,000 new bureaucracies were called into being by the Cancun Agreement. Now, they've learned not to do it as a treaty because you've just heard Jim Inhofe, and let's give him a round of applause for his help for us on all this. Because people like Jim Inhofe, who have a vote on whether you ratify a treaty that your government might sign, he would not sign any such treaty, and he has made sure that a goodly proportion of the Senate won't, so they can't ever get the two-thirds majority they need. God bless the United States Constitution. So they're doing this by stealth. They're setting up these bureaucracies anyway. The only constraint upon their doing this at the moment is that they can't get as much money out of the Western countries as they wish. Now, at Durban, I had a certain amount of difficulty getting into that conference. So, thanks to CFACT, we borrowed a plane, and I dropped in on the place from a very great height, 10,000 feet, I think it was, if Craig Rucker remembers. And here is a selfie. If you're going to do a selfie, do it properly. And do I look miserable about this? No, I was having a lovely time. Now, the Durban conference produced a series of heroically stupid findings. They were saying that there should be rights of legal personality for Mother Earth. Now, I'm going to play the part of Mother Earth, and I want to sue the Heartland Institute for doing damage to me. Who is going to act for me? And how am I going to instruct my lawyers? None of this was quite made clear in the treaty draft. They were going to have an international climate court before which Mother Earth could appear and say, hello, I'm Mother Earth. And of course, this was only going to be against Western nations. There was a specific clause excluding what are called the Annex II parties from being brought before this court. They were going to reduce carbon dioxide concentration from 400 parts per million to 200, which would halve it roughly, and that would have led to the deaths of quite a lot of trees and plants worldwide, and most of the animals as well. And this was in a serious international treaty draft. They were going to tell the Western nations to curb their greenhouse gases so they rose no further from that date. That didn't work. They said, this was marvelous, they said, we are going to order the Western nations to cut their emissions by, and these words appear in the treaty draft, more than 100%. You couldn't make this stuff up, but they did. And what was extraordinary was that the 2,000 journalists who went to that conference, not one of them reported anything that was in the draft conclusions by the chair, which is where I got them from. I went to the documentation center where they were handing out this material to any journalist who wanted it, and to the likes of me who were just curious. I got this document. I said to Mark Morano, who was there, I said, this contains some heroically lunatic stuff. He said, right, go away and study it until you've read the whole thing. I was up until 3 o'clock the following morning. It was 150 pages of this drivel. And I then wrote a piece for What's Up With That for that. Anthony is here, incidentally. Let's give him a round of applause. There he is. Stand up, Anthony, and take a bow. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, you've had a very good lunch. You need the exercise. Give the man a standing ovation. He thoroughly deserves it. Come along. So Anthony ran my piece listing all these lunacies. And this is what happened. WordPress got in touch with us. WordPress hosts his blog. It hosts something like 500,000 blog postings every day. And we got a call, or Anthony got a call, saying from WordPress that my piece, just telling people what was in this Durban document, had been the most viewed piece of 500,000 on WordPress that day. They tell the person who comes top every day. Now that is startling. Not because of the brilliance of the writing, you can take that as read, but because, and modest with it, but because the newspapers and the journalists who'd been there said what a couple of the left-wing journalists who've interviewed me here have said. Oh no, the readers aren't interested in things like that. They don't want to know what's being negotiated in their name. They want to know how much you're being paid by the Koch brothers. One of them actually said this to me. I said, I've never met the Koch brothers, and they've never paid me anything. Well, you're paid by the fossil fuel industry, aren't you? I said, well, no, I'm not paid by anyone. And they said, but what about ExxonMobil? I said, oh, you've got me there. My check didn't arrive last month, though. Or the month before that. Indeed, I haven't had any checks from ExxonMobil. But that was their line. They didn't think that the readers would be interested. And of course, we proved them wrong. People, once again, want to know what is being done in their name, and I call out the world's media for their failure time and time and time again to do their duty. And then there was Doha. Now, I went to the Doha conference, and the first thing I did on the second last day of the conference was go and collect the draft conclusions by the chair. Only they weren't handing them out anymore. Can't think why. And they said, we do not know what you are talking about. So I explained, and I said that every previous conference had had this document and I had analyzed it. We have never heard of any such thing. That was their answer. Now, because we exposed to the light of fresh air, and public gaze what they were up to, they have learnt to hide it. And the whole of this process has now gone underground. And you can check this. You can do an experiment on your own when you get home. Because the final decisions adopted by what is known as Conference of the Parties number 18 and of the following conference number 19, if you go to the links where you were supposed to be able to find the documents of those conferences and you click on the button marked decisions, it's a self-referent link. It just goes back and back and back to the same page. You will not be able to find the decisions that they took because they are so embarrassed that they no longer want you to know. They want to get away with this process without any democratic scrutiny whatsoever from anyone. And we are not going to let them get away with it. Now, I was sitting in the final plenary session very much at the last moment of the conference, and the chairman said, rather unwisely, is there anybody representing a group who would like to say anything? And I happened to be sitting in one of the delegates' chairs. I think it must have been Burma. And so there was this microphone in front of me with a button. And if you wanted to be on, all you had to do was press this button. So I thought about it a bit, and then I thought, well... So I was on. And I said, oh, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I represent I had to think up something rather quickly, the Asian Coastal Cooperation Initiative. And I said, we have concerns about this process because there's been no global warming for 16 years. Even if there had been, it's cheaper to do nothing about it and let it happen and adapt to it. And so could we please get some fresh scientists in to have another look at everything to make sure that these conferences are heading in the right direction? Pandemonium. I had expected, not, a standing ovation for having given them the good news that global warming had stopped a long time previously. Instead of which, it was as though this was a Justin Dribbler pop concert, and the audience had been told that Mr. Dribbler was not, after all, going to appear. There were catcalls, boos, hisses, and they didn't sound quite as grown up as teenagers, put it that way. And these were the serious national negotiating delegates of 194 nations, minus Myanmar, who was still partying in the souk. So the response to this was I was pounced on by UN police as I tried to leave the hall, and they said they were taking away my badge and I was going to be banned for life from UN conferences. So I said, gentlemen, thank heavens for that. However, that does not mean that I am not still on the case, chasing after the traffic light tendency. The Greens, they call themselves green because they're too yellow to admit they're really red. I will continue, as long as I have your kind support, to fight this movement that is trying to destroy our freedoms. And there is one thing I want all of you to do, each of you to do. It is to contact your elected representatives and make it absolutely plain to them that they should insert one vital clause, which I'll come to in a moment, in that treaty in Paris in 2015, at which this ghastly process is supposed to culminate in the establishment of the new world order. So let's just show you why it is that they are under such pressure to conclude this matter quickly. Here you will see the trend in temperatures over the last 17 years, 10 months. You've seen it several times during this conference. They know this. They know that if they cannot persuade the world to cut its carbon emissions, the carbon emissions will continue to rise, and temperatures, though I think they will rise a little, will not rise anything like as fast as they predicted, and the gap will become ever more embarrassingly wider. That is why they're doubling down on this and have been doing so over the last couple of years. It is necessary, therefore, that we should stop them succeeding by one very simple expedient, and that is to insert into that Treaty of Paris a get-out clause that allows any state party to that treaty to resile from it simply by giving notice in writing to the depository state. Clause 27 of Kyoto did this. This is the one thing that you can all do. You can make absolutely sure that both of your senators and your congressmen are fully aware that they must have a clause like this inserted into the Treaty of Paris, because if they do, the treaty will eventually be harmless as they gradually realize that the temperature isn't going to respond as they had thought it would. That is the most vital thing. A get-out clause is a freedom clause. And it is of freedom that I would speak when I end. For this nation was built on the concept and the idea and the ideal and the very air and soil of freedom. It is always a unique privilege to be allowed to stand upon this soil of freedom and to enjoy the feeling that anything is possible and nothing is ruled out. But I know at what cost to your founding fathers that freedom was won. I know at what cost to your founding fathers' successors and to our ancestors as we fought together on freedom's furthest frontiers, at what cost in blood and lives, as well as treasure, that freedom was maintained. For although freedom is our birthright, although it is something we ought to have the right to expect, each new generation must fight for that freedom for itself again and again and again. Therefore, I say, God bless America, God bless all of you, and to those who are trying to take our freedom away on a global scale, you will fail. Thank you.